Now, a prisoner at Guantanamo Bay is to be released after a judge ruled that he'd been held there illegally for more than 6 years. With more on this story, let's now cross live to our Washington, D.C. studio. Dina, over to you.
Hi there, Alice. Well, this is really a complicated and fascinating case. I'm going to break it down for you. Mohammed Jawad, that's who we're talking about here. Now, back in 2002, he was accused of throwing a grenade and injuring 2 U.S. soldiers and their interpreter back in Kabul. He was then taken into Guantanamo Bay, and he became one of the youngest detainees to be held there. Now, just yesterday, a U.S. judge ruled that he needs to be released and sent back to Afghanistan. But some U.S. lawyers saying that they're considering that to file another criminal case against him. Now, let's not forget, this really comes at a time when the Obama administration is scrambling to meet the deadline to close down Guantanamo Bay by January 2010. They're running into a lot of problems. First of all, U.S. allies are reluctant to take in some of these detainees into their own countries. Even the U.S. Congress doesn't really know what to do. They're waiting for a relocation plan from the White House. So, could this case then set a path for future Guantanamo Bay cases? Well, to help me dissect this case and the implications that it could have on other GITMO detainees is Colleen Costello. She is an attorney for Human Rights USA. Thank you so much for being here. So 6.5 years later, the U.S. judge says this guy needs to go back to Afghanistan. But then you have U.S. lawyers considering filing another case against him. What could this case potentially look like?
Well, it's interesting because the case that the judge recently ruled on was a habeas case, which means the detainee was challenging the government's authority or the legality of the government's detention of him at Guantanamo Bay. So it was a civil suit. But what the government is now considering doing is filing a criminal case against him.
Is that legal? I mean, how can they do that? He was there, what, 12 years old for 6.5 years, and they want to file another case?
The government does have the authority to file criminal charges against somebody if they're in the government's custody. So what the government would have to do, and this is subject to new rules that Congress recently passed in a supplemental defense appropriations bill, the government would have to notify Congress of its intent to prosecute this detainee, and then the government would have to transfer him to the United States so he could stand trial here in the U.S.
Now, the district judge said that there were already so many problems with this case, that this guy was tortured into confessing. She's even questioning his mental and physical capabilities. How is that going to play out if a case is brought up, if he is indicted?
I think those facts would pose substantial obstacles to the government's potential prosecution, which is probably why the government right now is weighing both options, both prosecution and transferring him back to Afghanistan.
Now, the judge did say that he's already been through so much and that he's only a juvenile. But at the same time, there are people who say, look, he was young, but he did grown-up things. He injured people, but he could have killed more people. So how is that, do you think, going to play out in the court of law?
Well, I think if he was tried in a criminal case here in the United States, I think there might be, and I don't know for sure, but there might be some consideration for the fact that he was a juvenile when he committed the crime, just like we have different standards for juveniles here in our own U.S. system for people who commit crimes within the United States.
But is this gonna lessen his punishment then? Because again, this is a different kind of case. You know, this is something that he did back in Afghanistan. He was brought into GITMO. You have all these different countries, all these different personalities here at play. I mean, what's going to happen?
That I don't know. I'm not sure if his punishment would necessarily be lessened because he was a juvenile when he committed the crime, but I think it's certainly a mitigating factor that could be taken into account. I think the other mitigating factor that prosecutors and his defense counsel would have to look at, and the judge as well, is the fact that he was subjected to abuse while he was held in Afghan and I believe U.S. detention. I think the fact that he's also served several years of essentially prison time at Guantanamo Bay would also help to mitigate any kind of sentence that he could potentially receive if he were charged and tried in a criminal case.
Now, very quickly, Afghan authorities do say that he needs to come back home. But what guarantee did they have, does the U.S. have that when he is set free, if he is set free, that he won't try to take revenge against the U.S. or even against his own country?
I don't know if there's any guarantee at this point. The Afghan government, if it believes he has committed crimes within Afghanistan, could also try him there. And it's happened, I believe, in other detainee cases as well, where detainees have been sent back to their home countries and have been charged criminally in their home countries.
That's very Interesting. Thank you so much for your time. Well, the question really is, could this case set a precedent for future Guantanamo Bay cases? We'll certainly keep you posted on all of the latest with this story and the Guantanamo Bay issue in general. Back to you, Alice.
Some interesting issues raised there. Okay, Dina, thank you very much to you and your guest over in